octopus that is on a sculpted nail, so I'm using my practice finger for this so I can get that nice long stiletto. I love the way this one turned out. It is so extreme and over the top, and it has a beautiful sea creature on it, which I absolutely love. I am such a fan of anything from the ocean, unless it's a shark and it's very close to me, then I'm not such a big fan of it. But otherwise, I just love the way that an octopus looks, and they're so intelligent. I love this one. I hope you guys like this as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe to get my future videos as well.
So I'm going to begin by fitting a form onto my nail. If you're doing this on a practice finger, make sure that you have your finger wrapped with a piece of tape so the form will stick, otherwise it won't stick to the silicone. Otherwise, if you're doing this on your own finger, you don't have to worry about the tape. So we're going to close the form and make it into a nice long stiletto. So when you're closing a form for a stiletto, you have it pinched to the length that you want the stiletto to be. And since I want this to be essentially as long as my form will let me, I'm going to pinch it just so that it closes right at the tip of the form. And then with some clear acrylic, I'm going to blend the transition from the natural nail, or in this case, the nail tip that's on my practice finger, down onto the form. You don't have to continue that clear acrylic all the way down to the tip of the nail or where you want the tip of the nail to be, but you do want to just kind of blend it and smooth it out so that there's a nice gradual transition and there's not ever a ledge. Now, using a collection of greens and blues, we're going to be doing a marble going all the way down so it gets progressively darker. So you want there to be the lightest colors towards the cuticle, and then as it nears the tip of the nail, they'll just get darker and darker. Pick out the colors that you want in advance so that you know if it's 4 colors that you use, that the first one is focused mainly in the upper quarter of the nail, and then it gets kind of fades into the next one and the next one, so on and so forth, all the way down. As long as you have a good collection of colors, it's not really too difficult to get that transition to go. When you're picking up your 2 color beads, make sure that you always dip into the lighter color first and then into the darker color. That'll just give you otherwise the darker color, if you go into the darker color first, it'll bleed all the way through the lighter color if that's the second color you're dipping into, and you'll have a single color. You won't have that 2-tone color that you're looking for whenever you're doing a marble. So you want to make sure that you always go light first, then dark. After you have your little marble collection of colors going down the nail, then you're going to encapsulate this with a layer of clear acrylic to make sure that it's nice and strong. That's a big part of the reason why it wasn't so crucial to have that clear acrylic blend and nail down all the way to the tip. If you don't want to encapsulate, you may consider doing a clear acrylic base all the way down the entire length of what you want the nail to be. After it's done and it's cured and you can take the form off, go ahead and do so, and then you're going to file the nail into shape with your e-file. Whenever you're doing a super long stiletto like this, you cannot do all of the filing with your e-file. You must switch to a hand file in order to get all of the lines to be crisp and clean and straight. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to switch to it's like a 150 grit hand file, and then after it's been all filed and smoothed, I'm going to apply a layer of gel sealer over the whole nail to get it nice and shiny. After that has been cured, now we're going to start making our octopus. I'm going to begin by sculpting my octopus's legs, and I'm using some really bright colors for this. I've got a very neon orange that I'm going to be doing for the beginning colors. I did add more than one shade of color just across all of the tentacles, but to start out with, you can just begin with a single color. I'm going to pick up each tentacle after they're sculpted and place them on the nail. This is one of those exercises in practice that you just have to kind of get the feel of when to pick up the tentacles. If it's not a type of a technique that you use frequently, where you work with the acrylic where it's in that very small window of time where you can pick it up and you can still bend it before it turns where it gets kind of hard. This is something where if you're not used to working with acrylic in this particular stage, you may have some tentacles that you end up having to just scrap and throw away if you miss your window of opportunity, or if you try to pick them up too soon and they get too sticky. So make sure you're wearing a pair of gloves for this, and just give yourself some patience and be nice to yourself. Even if it's something where you've done this a lot, like this tentacle got a little bit harder than what it normally would and it was going to fall right off. If that happens, I'm just going to reattach it with a little bit of clear acrylic because it's in a good shape. It just didn't want to stay. And that's fine too. We're going to pick up the next one. As you're going with your tentacles, make sure that you have a plan in mind so that they kind of go in the right direction. I like to work from left to right, so I'll do like the 2 lowest tentacles, one on each side, and then just kind of inch my way upwards. That way you can kind of keep a good balance to make sure that your tentacles look like they're even from side to side. It's not like when you're doing hair where you can add more or less and go back and forth and just keep adding to where it seems like it's balanced. Because you really only want to have 8 tentacles total, 4 on each side, you have to be a little bit more careful with where you're placing each one to get it to be just the shape and the filled out as filled out as you want it to be. Okay, there we go. Now that we're done with that, we're going to start adding the rest of the details of our octopus, specifically the head. So as you are adding the head of your octopus, you're going to be smoothing out the transition of all of those tentacles, because at the moment they were kind of a mess, which is as expected. But as you begin adding the head of your octopus and you go through and you kind of just smooth out between each of those tentacles, take your time. Make sure you don't rush the process. There is a little bit of a webbing at the body where the legs come off of the body of the octopus, where there's kind of a smooth, sort of a swoopy line between the legs. That's going to help you out a lot as far as adding the balance to the way that the legs look coming off the body and keeping everything kind of just evened out, knowing that you can add that little bit of extra acrylic. And then as you're going through and you're doing them, make sure that you figure out which of the tentacles are forward on the body and which ones are behind, because you're going to be adding more acrylic that will help push and pull which ones are front and which ones are in the back. Going to keep going through, adding a little bit of acrylic here and there until I'm happy with it. This is a project that I would recommend doing tiny beads of acrylic comparatively. So don't try to do a whole section with one big bead, because you're going to just be chasing the acrylic and it's not going to have as smooth of a final result as what you would probably be hoping for. So do smaller pieces at a time. Just use, a focus on a single area, focus on a single tentacle, on a single transition, on a single spot on the head, and then just blend the acrylic out, especially if you're using a faster setting acrylic. So I am using a 3D monomer that is going to cure rather quickly. And this particular powder that I'm using, because sometimes the different colors, they'll cure a little faster or slower. This one is a little bit quicker than some. And so that also has influence on how big of a space that I'm trying to work on at any given moment. But because I know it's going to cure quickly, and I want to make sure that everything looks nice and smooth and finished when it's done, I'm just going to do tiny little areas at a time. Once you are happy with the generalized shape of your octopus, the head looks like it's good, the body's all smoothed together, the legs look strong and even, you're going to need to add your octopus's eyes. So this is another one of those little details, really easy actually. Just add a bead of acrylic down and then take a dotting tool and add a hole inside that first bead of acrylic. So place that first bead down. If your acrylic will pretty much hold its shape, you don't have to do a whole lot as far as adjusting the shape of the eye, and then take your dotting tool, poke your octopus's eye open. And using the same color, I'm going to add a little bit of a smoothing transition on the eyes, as well as I'm going to add a little bit of, I believe this is like the ear flaps on the side of the octopus's head. So add a little bit of acrylic and then create a swirl in the middle of that section with the tip of your brush. And then I'm just going to blend out the eyes. That first base of the circle of acrylic with the dot in the middle really helps create the structure of the eye, but then you just want to smooth it out so they don't look like they're unattached. Now, using more colors of acrylic, this is where it really gets fun. I'm going to be adding some shading on my octopus. I'm going to take a purple and I'm going to be adding a little bit of a purple to the end of each tentacle. The color of acrylic that I'm using, this purple one, is not one that's super creamy pigmented. It's a little bit more of like a jelly pigmented, I hope that makes some sense. And that will give you this kind of mottled, almost, I don't want to say bruised because that gives the wrong impression, but kind of a bruised look to the end of the tentacles, because the orange will pop through the color and it won't look smooth, which is my plan actually. I want it to look a little bit splotchy, a little bit uneven. And especially when I go to add some of this color across the very back of our octopus's head, you'll really see how that plays so nicely for an octopus, that this color is not a smooth, creamy, pigmented look. There's certain colors where the color is just so intense that it will cover anything. That's not the case with this purple. It'll allow that orange to kind of glow through the purple. I'm going to take a slightly shimmery yellow color, very, very pale. I'm going to be adding highlights to my octopus with that color. I'm going to add highlights to the tops of the eyes and then a little bit on the tentacles here and there. The fact that this color has just a hint of a shimmer to it is going to almost make it look underwater. It's going to add to that underwater look. So here is that purple color on the back of the head. As you can see, it does have this kind of like more purple, less purple. The orange is still popping through. Really looks like an octopus. And then I'm going to take some more of that color, just add shading here and there around the octopus wherever I feel like I need it. Really make sure the eyes look like they're nice and 3D. Add a little bit of shading I did between the tentacles a little bit. I'm going to take a brighter yellow and fill in my octopus's eyes. So those little holes we made with the dotting tool, you can just add acrylic right in the center and let them fill in. Add a little bit of the pale yellow That's the shimmery color right along those ear flaps. And then anywhere you want to add a little bit of a highlight, you certainly can. If you want to bring in more of the yellow color that was used for inside the eyes, you can add some more of that too. There's a lot of different just opportunities to add color to this octopus. There's a lot of different color palettes you can use. Octopi can change the color and the texture of their body, and so as far as color schemes go, there's so many different options and so many different things that you can do just to kind of fit your mood as far as that goes. However, I do want to say one thing in terms of when you're picking a color palette, because the background of this nail is a green, teal, blue, to make the octopus really stand out and look very vibrant and very intense, which I would say in general, to me, an octopus just is intense. That just seems to be their aura is very intense. To make our octopus look just that much more intense, you're going to want to go to the opposite of the color wheel. So if you're looking at a color wheel and you want to have that really big kind of wow factor, whatever your background color is, you're going to go to the opposite side of that color wheel to find your 4D art or your 3D art color, your foreground color, your focal point color. And since the opposite of blue is going to be orange, we're going to be sticking with kind of that really bright orange tones. The other colors that are complementary, the purples and the yellows, are just going to enhance that orange. So I'm going to really stick with that orange color as kind of the main effect, the main thing on my octopus, with all those other colors just sort of helping along the way. Now to add the little suction cups, I'm going to be taking very small beads of white acrylic, placing down 2 or 3 of them, depending on how fast my acrylic is setting, and that's something you'll just have to experiment. It could even be different depending on day to day, but just, see how many you can do before they get a little too hard. And then I'll take a pointy tweezers, dip that into white powder, and then press into the center of those little white dots of acrylic to create the suction cups, to make a little hole in the middle. Do this to the underside of all the tentacles where you can, where they're visible and where you can get to them with both your acrylic brush and your tweezers. If there's any spots where you can't get to them but you can see them, then maybe you'll have to try to figure out if there's a different way to add them, maybe from a different angle or using some paint instead of doing it with the acrylic. But as long as you can get to the places to add the little suction cups, you want to make sure you add as many as you possibly can. After your octopus has had the sufficient number of suction cups added to his whole little body, I'm going to be switching to acrylic paint and adding my final details. Because I did so much detailing with just the acrylic, different color tones, highlights, lowlights, shading, then there's really not a whole lot that has to be done with acrylic paint, but just a little bit, outlines here and there, details to the inside of the octopus's eyes, and then I'm going to be adding a little bit of a spotting pattern across the back of the head, diluted white paint, and then I'll tap it out with my finger. And because this is acrylic paint and not a gel product, it is non-toxic and you can touch it with your finger. So if you do want to do it like I did, where you just kind of tap it out with your fingertip, that is a-okay. I'm going to apply a 3D glaze over my octopus to make sure that it is so nice and shiny and does look slightly wet. And that's it. This is extreme over the top. I absolutely love it. I love sculpting anything sea life, and this one was no exception. I hope you guys like it as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well.